as a species, not care about life anymore. We might get thrown into chaos where people are like, oh, that's the truth? This is all just a big joke or game and none of it matters and we can do whatever we want and there's no consequences. And then it might just go right off the rails. So maybe they're trying to, maybe the governments are trying to keep us under control by not letting us know the real truth, because if we found it out, it would just get crazy. It would just get too crazy here and everything would go out of control,
I don't know. How would you feel? Let's say I'm going to just make a wild claim here, just BS right now, okay? It's not real, folks, okay? It's just like the War of the Worlds. It's not real, what I'm going to say. But let's say maybe our government or world governments have been taken over years ago after World War II by an alien species, and they're controlling our government, and they're the black part of the government that controls the government, and all the other people are basically puppets, and you don't know. It just seems like it's so many strange things going on. Like Mary Joyce, it runs a reporting center of UFOs and Bigfoot out of Cashiers, North Carolina. She claims that there's a military base, underground military base there, and that the government is working with aliens. And they're the type of aliens that would find, well, they would love me because I would have a lot of meat on me. But they're the ones that like eating humans. But they were supposedly working with our government and giving us technology in return for whatever. Maybe they're harvesting people. Again, you talk about the people missing in the national forest. That's crazy amount of people. In the last 90 years, it disappeared since they've been tracking in the national forest. I mean, come on, that's crazy. And the thing is that they don't spend any real time looking for the people. They don't keep the park police don't even really keep very much documentation about it. The person who wrote the 411 book even said the same thing, that they won't even give him information. They want enough money to go out and buy a mansion just to get a little bit of information. It's doing whatever they can to stall, for people who don't understand. And it's scary. And then you look at, okay, well, these amount of people have disappeared in the national forest, and it seems to be children and women. You don't hear much of the men being abducted or disappearing. It seems to be a lot of cases of women and children that disappear. And when
and the men that are abducted are sometimes forced to have sex with the women, and then they're just like dropped off, I guess. So they're just used as like a sperm donor.
That's the scary thing. But then you look at the people in the cities. It's just so many people vanishing on the regular basis. Yeah, there's cellular. Look, I can't even talk right now. I'm so stressed over this. Killers out there, right? That prey on people, but not as many of them it would take as the amount of people have gone just missing on a regular basis.
Yeah, something is definitely going on, and it's not a bunch of serial killers going out and doing this. There is something anomalous going on, and I think it's part of a joint UFO alien government program, and I think they are fully informed. I think they have projects that deal with it, work on it, and are part of it. And in fact, one of my other stories is kind of about that. I interviewed a guy, Rob Amos, and I have a DVD out on Amazon. It's called True Stories, the UFO Abduction of Rob Amos. And I've never told this story on the air or anything. The only way you would ever have heard this story is if you bought the DVD. And Rob currently, Rob Amos works for a major race driver, and he works in the NASCAR industry, and he's part of some of the products in NASCAR, the fuel, and he sells different things, and he's in with a couple of major race drivers. So he's a businessman. He does a lot of charity work. he's a good person and he's an honest person, and he had never told anyone this story until he told my a friend of mine, and then my friend told me about it and introduced me to him, and I asked if I could interview him about it, and reluctantly he said yes, because he felt like he needed to get it off of his chest. And so what happened to him was back in the 80s, mid 80s, he's from Illinois, the Illinois area, and him and his friend used to like to go fishing late at night, like midnight till dawn, because that was when it was quiet. That was when the fish would be biting. They would just get down on their boat, quietly go out into the middle of this big lake and fish. So it was around midnight, and they were out fishing in the on this lake, and it's calm, quiet, no sound, no nothing. And Rob said he was standing up on the boat next to his friend, and they had their lines cast. And Rob was looking up, and he saw this light quietly coming down toward them slowly, and he was just staring at it. And he looked over at his friend, and he goes, do you see what I see? And he goes, and his friend said, yeah, but I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want you to think I was crazy. And they were looking at it, and this is at midnight, he said. And they're staring up at it right after he said that to him, and his friend said that back to him. And all of a sudden, moments later, it was 6 o'clock in the morning. Their boat had beached itself on the edge of the lake. They were both still standing in the same position, looking up, but their shirts were open, and they were burned from their head, their forehead, all across their face, and down through the part of their exposed shirt area and to the top of their pants. And so his friend freaked out about it, would never talk about it ever again. Just like how I said that the other guy. It's funny, sometimes it affects people differently. Like my other friend, Scott, who saw the UFO and the UFO said, come with me. It didn't affect him, but it affected his friend. And his friend totally went into just, his life kind of came off the rails and went into a different direction. Well, Rob's friend went into a hardcore, like a cult religion, and he would never speak of the experience again. Now, I in the interview, I asked Rob, because I recorded the interview and I put it on the DVD, I asked Rob if he had memories of it, of what happened during that 6 hours of missing time. He said it was like a moment went by and it was 6 hours later. What he said was he has flashes of memory where he's in some type of a ship that he thought it was, and he's laying on a table, like not laying flat, but like half standing up and half laying down. And he said that he had the feeling, but couldn't really see what was going on, but he felt like his friend was next to him in extreme distress, freaking out, and that Rob said that in his mind or out loud he was saying, you better leave my friend alone, you better get away from him, you better get away from him, and he was going to try and defend his friend. And he says that that's pretty much all of the memories that he has spots of. And he tries to remember, but there's some kind of a block in his memory. In fact, I talked to Travis. I don't know if you know who Travis Walton is?
I certainly do. I mean, everybody who's into UFOs knows about him and what happened to him, yes.
Well, in the 90s, in 1993, I went to language school for the Department of Defense. I went to the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California. I was Army intelligence analyst, and I was becoming a Korean linguist. So I went to Monterey, and I was living in Monterey from 93 to 95 while I went to language school. And I was studying Korean there. And at the same time, I got into the military government sector, intelligence sector, because I wanted to learn the truth about all of the secrets, the government, the military, the CIA, UFOs, who shot JFK, and all that stuff. So I joined MUFON at the same time, and I was a field investigator for alien crashes and sightings in California for the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON. You've probably heard of MUFON.
Oh, yeah.
So I used to listen to the radio in Monterey, and out in Santa Cruz, there was the UFO Hour run by a guy named Ron Lampy. And I don't know if you ever heard of the UFO Hour.
No, I don't remember that one.
Well, at that time, they had a show, and I would call in and stuff like that, and because I liked calling in on the radio station, and I had no idea that my life would take the direction, that I was government then. I didn't realize I'd become an author and filmmaker and get into the whole truth movement the way I am. But I told them, I go, you guys should interview Travis Walton. So I called Travis Walton, and I told Ron Lampy of the UFO Hour, I said, I'm going to get Travis Walton to be on your show. So I called him, I looked him up, and I called his house in Snowflake, Arizona. And I talked to a family member, and they said, well, he's not here in Snowflake right now. He's in Los Angeles on, like, a book and movie tour. But they gave me his contact info because I wanted to interview him. So I called up Travis Walton. I said, hey, will you do the interview? And he said yes, and he was really nice. And he did the interview. And one of the things that he said was that no matter how hard he tried to remember exactly all the details on that during that abduction while he was on the ship, that there's some type of a block in his memory, a barrier that he can't get past to remember what happened. And I think that's what's happening. There's a mind control to this whole thing. During the abduction process, I think that they have such control over our minds that they can put blocks in there, or they can fraction off our psyche. Like, for instance, you've heard about, like, the Monarch Mind Control Program, or, the Montauk program, where they have the mind control.
Oh, yeah.
Well, MK Ultra. I think it's a part of fractioning off the psyche. When you go through such an extreme, distressful experience, your psyche shuts down and you block it off, and it schisms the mind and causes a multiple personality disorder. And I think part of that alien abduction process is about such a fractioning of the mind that you can go into that. I think that's part of it, and then they can put a block in there to keep people like Travis Walton from remembering what exactly happened. Like my friend Rob Amos, he has spotty memory, he has a feeling of what happened, he has physical evidence of what happened, and he also has a scar on him, like an indentation where he thinks that there's something in him, and he's actually a couple of years ago he was saying he was going to he could have it removed because he believes he was implanted. I think once you're abducted, you're implanted and tracked.
Well, the thing is, even like Timothy Collin, who's been on my show a couple of times, he's going to be back on in 2 weeks. The same thing. Him and his wife saw a UFO, and it kind of like shocked him. But then, he kind of like forgot about it. But then all of a sudden he started, having a little bit of pain somewhere else because he got in a car accident. And, they went in and did x-rays. And then all of a sudden, here's something showed up in the x-ray. And the doctor couldn't figure out what it was. And he got a hold of Dr. Roger Lear. And it was an implant of like a grain of sand, not sand, like a piece of rice size, And
yeah.
And it was made out of some of the compounds in it, because it was sent to a lab, if I remember right, was a silver. But the way it was put together, it was no way it could have been compounded this way on our planet. This was just impossible. And it's just weird things like that. But again, he couldn't really remember anything. All he remembers that he saw a UFO. And that goes back to, even like with me, back in that desert in New Mexico, I saw that bright light, and I got out of the car and stared at it. Didn't think much of it after it took off. I just couldn't figure out what it was, and I forgot about it. And then years later, setting off, the security alarms everywhere I go. And then finding out, that there's something near my spine, in the middle of my back, and there's no scarring or nothing. How something that size got there? Then, like I said, talking to Michael Hall about all this stuff after Timothy Collin was on, it kind of like hit me really hard that night in New Mexico. That weird light, and I got out. I mean, you know, a lot of people, you know, they don't remember what happens. You know, I had a guest on my show,